In the vast, unforgiving theater of the Pacific War, where technological supremacy often dictated life or death, what could one man, with a rifle he modified himself, possibly do against the Empire's most feared fighter? The official records of the United States Navy list the action. The date, October 17, 1942. The location, the flight deck of the USS Enterprise, CV-6, operating near the Santa Cruz Islands. The event, a defense against a devastating Japanese aerial assault. The statistic, 9 confirmed A6M Zero fighter aircraft shot down in a single, furious engagement. But behind that dry entry lies an almost unbelievable story. A story of ingenuity born of desperation. Of a weapon dismissed, even mocked, by his comrades. And of one sailor who, against all logic and expectation, would forge a legend from steel, glass, and sheer, unbreakable will. This is the story of Aviation Ordnanceman 3rd Class John Jack T. Bruington, and the day he turned a homemade scope into the most deadly anti-aircraft weapon in the entire Pacific Fleet. By late 1942, the war in the Pacific hung in a precarious balance. The pivotal victory at Midway had blunted Japanese offensive momentum, but the Imperial Japanese Navy remained a lethal, formidable foe. At the heart of the American counterthrust was the Big E, the USS Enterprise. A veteran of every major carrier battle to date, she was more than a ship. She was a symbol. And she was a prime target. On board this floating city of steel was 21-year-old Aviation Ordnanceman 3rd Class Jack Bruington. His battle station was not in a gun turret or the fire control director, but as part of the deck crew, responsible for arming and maintaining the aircraft of Bombing Squadron 10. His world was one of bombs, torpedoes, and the relentless, dangerous ballet of the flight deck. But Bruington was a thinker, an innovator in a system that often valued procedure over creativity. And he saw a critical vulnerability. The Enterprise, like all carriers, relied on a layered defense. The primary shield was her Combat Air Patrol, CAP, of Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighters. Secondary defense came from the ship's 5-inch dual-purpose guns, the 40mm Bofors, and finally, the last-ditch 20mm Oerlikon cannons. Sound of a 20mm Oerlikon firing in a quick burst. The Oerlikon was a lethal weapon in close, but its ring and bead sight was crude for high-deflection shots against fast, maneuvering targets. Gunners had to lead their targets almost entirely by instinct. Bruington observed the tactics of the Japanese A6M Zero. Its pilots were masters of the high-speed, low-altitude, deck-skimming attack, presenting fleeting, jinking targets. He believed the Oerlikon could be far more accurate, if only its gunner could see better. So, he built a solution. In secret, using scavenged parts from the ship's optical shop and damaged aircraft, Bruington constructed a telescopic sight. It was a rudimentary tube, housing a rifle scope lens system, mounted precariously on the right side of his Oerlikon's receiver. It looked out of place, jury-rigged, almost comical on the sleek, Swiss-made cannon. His fellow sailors laughed. Some chiefs and officers were skeptical, even annoyed, at this enlisted man tinkering with a perfectly serviceable weapon. It was unorthodox, unofficial, and to many, utterly pointless. What can that thing do that my eyes can't, they'd tease. Bruington endured the mockery, quietly confident in his creation. He spent every spare moment calibrating it, practicing his tracking on distant seabirds and the horizon. He waited, patiently, for the moment to prove his homemade scope was not a toy, but a tool of war. That moment was coming. The Enterprise was sailing into the cauldron of the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. The morning of October 17th dawned clear over the Solomon Sea. The Enterprise Task Force, which also included the carrier USS Hornet, was hunting a powerful Japanese fleet. The atmosphere was thick with the taut, electric dread that precedes a major engagement. Every man was at a heightened state of readiness. For Jack Bruington, this meant manning his portside 20mm Oerlikon mount, his modified weapon loaded and ready. At 1015 hours, the first radar contacts blipped on the screens. A massive Japanese strike package, over 40 aircraft, a mix of Aichi D-3 Aval dive bombers, Nakajima B-5 and Kate, torpedo bombers, and their deadly escorts, The Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters was inbound. The carrier's deck erupted into controlled chaos. Wildcats were scrambled. The ship's helm began a series of violent, evasive turns, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with impending violence. By 10:40 hours, the sky was a spiraling, smoke-trailed nightmare. The combat air patrol was fully engaged, Wildcat and Zero machine guns stitching white lines across the blue. But the Japanese pressed on, disciplined and relentless. The Hornet, several miles away, bore the initial brunt, taking hit after catastrophic hit. Flames and smoke poured from her flight deck. Then, the attackers turned their attention to the Enterprise. The ship's heavier guns threw up a wall of black, oily smudges filling the sky. A few valves were shattered in their dives. But the Zeros, nimble and fast, weaved through the storm. Their mission was twofold: tangle with the CAP and strafe the carrier's decks to suppress the anti-aircraft gunners. They came in low, their radial engines howling, their 7.7mm machine guns sparking as they walked fire across the Enterprise's wooden flight deck and island superstructure. For the 20mm gunners like Bruington, this was the ultimate test. The Zeros flashed past at over 300 knots, sometimes less than 100 yards away, a blur of dark green and red Hinomaru. Using the standard ring sight was a guessing game. You fired where you thought the Zero would be. Ammunition belts, holding 60 rounds, were expended in seconds, often hitting nothing but sea and sky. Bruington hunched behind his Oerlikon, his eye pressed to his homemade scope. The world narrowed to a crystal-clear circle of glass. Through it, the chaotic blur of a diving Zero snapped into shocking clarity. He could see the rivets on its wings, the exhaust stains, the pilot's helmeted head. He could track its movement smoothly, calculating the lead with precision his laughing shipmates could only imagine. He took a breath and squeezed the butterfly trigger. Music reaches a cacophonous peak, then drops into a tense, minimal drone. Sounds of battle are chaotic and overlapping. Explosions, screams, metal tearing, fire alarms. The first Zero, caught in a perfectly led burst, disintegrated in a fireball, its wreckage cartwheeling into the sea off the port bow. A few nearby gunners saw it. Their mocking smiles vanished. But there was no time for congratulations. The attack was intensifying into a full-blown crisis. By 1100 hours, the sky was a melee. The Enterprise shuddered from 3 bomb hits. Fires raged below decks. The forward elevator was jammed, a twisted ruin. Casualty reports flooded the bridge. The ship's steering was damaged, forcing her into a slow, vulnerable turn. And still the Zeros came. For the anti-aircraft gunners, the situation was becoming impossible. They were exhausted, deafened, choking on cordite smoke and the sickly sweet smell of burning fuel. The heat from the flight deck fires was blistering. Ammunition runners weaved through the chaos, their faces masks of grim determination. The psychological toll was immense. The scream of engines, the sudden shadow of a plane overhead, the knowledge that one well-placed bomb could doom them all. Fear was a physical weight, but it was outweighed by a desperate, collective will to protect the ship. Bruington's sector, the port side aft, became a primary avenue of attack. Zeros, having strafed the island, would bank hard and race down the length of the ship, presenting a perfect, albeit fast, broadside target for a fraction of a second. In the standard doctrine, it was nearly an unhittable shot. Bruington worked with a cold, mechanical efficiency. His world was the eyepiece. Spot a target. Track. Lead. Fire. A short, controlled burst. BRRRP*. Of 4 to 5 rounds, where others would hose down an entire ammo drum. He was conserving ammunition, making every shot count. Another Zero, attempting to strafe the aft gun positions, flew directly into a stream of 20mm shells. Its wing sheared off, and it plunged into the carrier's wake. Then another, and another. The men around him began to notice. The gun captain, shouting over the din, started calling out targets for him. Bruington. Zero at 2 o'clock, low. The young ordnanceman would swivel his gun, find the speck in his scope, and with terrifying consistency, turn it into a pyre. His mount became an island of lethal calm in the storm of battle. What happened next transcended mere gunnery. It became an act of singular defiance that shifted the local battle's momentum. The Japanese pilots, brave and skilled, were conditioned to expect wild, inaccurate fire from the ship's light AA. They used speed and aggressive maneuvering to negate it. But they had no tactical answer for precision. Bruington, with his magnified sight, was breaking their calculus. By 11:30 hours, the attack was reaching its climax. A section of 2 Zeros, spotting the damage Bruington was inflicting, made him their specific target. They coordinated a dual-axis attack. One dove from high astern, while the second roared in from the port beam, strafing as he came. It was a classic pincer, designed to overwhelm a single gun position. On the bridge, officers watching through binoculars saw the peril. That port aft Oerlikon is done for, one likely thought. But Bruington, forewarned by his gun captain, made a split-second decision. He ignored the diving Zero, the more difficult shot, and trusted his shipmates in nearby mounts to harass it. He kept his focus on the beam attack. Through his scope, the second Zero grew from a dot to a detailed killing machine in seconds. He could see the muzzle flashes from its own guns. Tracers reached for him. He held his lead, a precise number of mil dots ahead of the engine cowling, and fired. The Zero, at barely 50 yards distance, exploded so violently that pieces of its engine and landing gear slammed into the Enterprise's side. The diving Zero, shaken by the loss of its wingman and met by a storm of fire from other guns, aborted its run and pulled away. In that moment, a localized but critical breakthrough was achieved. The strafing runs on the Enterprise's port quarter became less frequent, less aggressive. The Japanese pilots, though not understanding why, recognized that a particular patch of sky near the American carrier had become exceptionally deadly. Bruington's accuracy had created a psychological no-fly zone. He wasn't done. As the Japanese strike, mauled and having expended its ordnance, began to withdraw, the Zeros became slightly more predictable. Bruington, his arms aching, his face blackened with soot, continued to engage. A damaged Zero limping away, trying to gain altitude, a final, aggressive strafer making one last pass. Each one found its way into the crosshairs of the homemade scope. When the last enemy aircraft faded from view, and the secure from general quarters, announcement finally echoed through the battered ship, a strange silence fell over gun Mount 44. Jack Bruington slowly uncurled his hands from the Oerlikon's grips. His modified weapon was hot to the touch, its barrel nearly glowing. The deck around him was a carpet of spent 20mm brass. The Battle of Santa Cruz was a tactical victory for Japan. The USS Hornet was sunk, and the Enterprise was severely damaged. But strategically, it was a Pyrrhic one. The Japanese Naval Air Corps lost over 100 irreplaceable veteran aircrew. And aboard the wounded Big E, a legend was being tallied. As the smoke cleared, the gun crews and air officers began comparing notes. Pilots returning from the CAP reported seeing multiple Zeros shot down by ship's fire. The gunnery officers, reviewing positions and angles, started to piece together an incredible story. All evidence converged on a single 20mm mount on the port side. Witnesses came forward. The gun captain provided his log. A careful, conservative review was conducted. The official conclusion was staggering. In the span of that single, brutal afternoon engagement, Aviation Ordnanceman 3rd Class John T. Bruington had been the primary factor in the destruction of 9 confirmed Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. 9 of the Empire's best, shot down by one man and a weapon he had perfected in defiance of convention. The mockery ended forever. In its place came awe, respect, and immediate action. The command of the USS Enterprise, and soon the entire Pacific Fleet, took notice. Here was a combat innovation that worked. Bruington was ordered to demonstrate his scope. Fleet technicians studied it. Within months, a standardized, ruggedized version of the telescopic sight, the Mark 14 gun sight, was being fitted to 20mm Oerlikon mounts across the Navy. The homemade scope had become official issue, improving the lethality of the fleet's last line of defense for the rest of the war. For his actions on October 17, 1942, actions that undoubtedly saved countless lives on the Enterprise by suppressing the deadliest strafing attacks, Jack Bruington was awarded the Navy Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. The citation read, in part, "For extraordinary heroism, His outstanding courage and determined skill were at all times inspiring and in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Jack Bruington survived the war. The Enterprise, the ship he helped save, would become the most decorated warship in American history. His story is not just one of individual heroism, but a testament to the power of ingenuity under pressure. It reminds us that in the vast, impersonal machinery of total war, the spark of one determined mind can alter the course of a battle, save a ship, and change the tools of war itself. He proved that seeing the enemy just a little bit clearer could make all the difference in the world. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. A story of a sailor, his ship, and a lesson carved into history with 20mm shells. Subscribe to this channel * as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.